Eyewitness News.
This is how most of us got to know Nick Clooney.
Good evening, everyone. Here's what's happening tonight.
But behind the scenes at Channel 12, the anchorman was also the managing editor, the leader of the newsroom, and the man in charge.
I don't think Cincinnatians have any idea how much was put into that newscast and how much of Nick was put into that newscast.
In just 8 years, he led Channel 12's news from last place to first, and his uncompromising standards transformed TV news in Cincinnati.
He called them the way he saw them. It gave me a few uncomfortable moments when I'd get some phone calls with buddies of mine yelling about what the devil is this guy doing. But I would always say, Nick, just do the right thing. And he did.
These days, Nick and Nina still live in Augusta, Kentucky.
How you doing, kid? What's going on?
It's where they raised their children and where Nina runs her store. The view from Augusta was one of the big influences that shaped Nick's style of journalism.
This is a very real place. These folks have real lives. Things don't always go well, but they survive in spite of that, and they know how to deal with that. And life here is how life is for most people.
Another influence was Nick's early life, hard and uncertain during the Great Depression. After his parents divorced, he and his sisters spent much of their growing up years in Cincinnati.
I was a child of Cincinnati. I lived out in Newtown. I lived in Green Hills. There is almost no part of the city that I haven't lived in. I went to school over the Rhine. We're driving in the over the Rhine region right now.
Nick went to 9 schools in Cincinnati, 13 in all.
My work was simply an extrapolation of what I had come from and what I had seen and all the diversity that I had grown up with.
Besides covering the news of the day, Nick showed his viewers another side of the community.
The poverty, the racism, the things that we didn't like to talk about. Justice was the dead center of everything we were doing. Whatever the beat was, the centerpiece of it, the core of it, was a thirst for and a drive for and a hope for justice.
Earlier in his career, Nick moved seamlessly between journalism and entertainment. Even had his own variety and talk show here, The Nick Clooney Show.
Great to have him here, Rosemary and Betty Clooney.
But his first love was always the news. His role models were WLW's anchorman Peter Grant and the great war correspondents William L. Shirer, Elmer Davis, and Edward R. Murrow.
I think Nick would be embarrassed for us to bring up his name in that Rushmore of great journalists, of great truth tellers and great truth pursuers, but so be it. It's true. Nick was like that, still is.
In 1977, Nick faced an ethical decision not many people know about. The problem was the station was already promoting its new live edge reports, even though the truck didn't work.
Almost a month. We were saying that we were doing these, and we were not doing them.
Nick threatened to quit. Then, almost overnight, the truck was fixed.
We were live and ready to go. And I went home happy because we were doing what we said we would do. And that was the night before the Beverly Hills fire in northern Kentucky. And we were able to have the live capability that next day. I know this sounds like something out of a movie, but it is the truth.
The word we get from the top of the hill is that it's a complete ball of fire on the inside.
That night, Channel 12 broadcast the best live reports from the scene of one of our greatest tragedies. The viewers switched to watch Nick's station, and many of them stayed with Channel 12.
It started with Nick and his principals and ended with Beverly Hills.
5 years later, when he was back in town, he picked up his conversation with us over at the Cincinnati Post, where he wrote 3 columns a week for 18 years. But Nick had one more TV story to do, maybe his toughest. At age 72, he and his son were determined to throw some light on the genocide in Darfur.
He said, and you got to go with me, Pop, because people will think if just an actor goes over there, it's a stunt. If you go over there, you're not an actor, you're a reporter. It's not a stunt anymore.
Did you know immediately who was responsible? Let me ask you.
Together, they made a powerful documentary, addressed a rally in Washington, and drew the country's attention to Darfur. For Nick, it's still about justice.
I see him as a person that radiates light. There's an old spiritual, this little light of mine. And I believe that Nick Clooney has let his light shine in such a brilliant way.
Nick is still a familiar voice around town.
You lend your light to one person, and he...
But perhaps it's his moral voice that we hear most clearly. Nick still speaks about justice. He still encourages us to do the right thing. And he still speaks up for those you see and those you don't.